you are gonna damage your ears for life. And that's not gonna be a pretty sight.
So if you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself for the podcast?
Yeah. My name is J.R. Fritsch, or James Russell Fritsch. Some people call me James, some people call me J.R. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm 44 years old, and we're here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Nice. So right now we are upstairs from Tandang Records, which is where we first met maybe 6 months ago, a year ago?
Probably about 6. It was February 16th, actually. Yeah. So I came on February 15th. I met Third Culture Kings and Meatjack for the beginning of their tour. So they did a tour of Malaysia, Java, and Bali that I helped arrange for them. So I basically met them here, and you were interviewing them, and I was sitting right over there, and we were all kind of sitting here. And so that was when we first met. Yeah.
So that was the first time we first met, but our lives have kind of crossed over into each other in interesting ways over the years. You helped organize the Third Culture Kings show, and we talked a little bit, and you told me about your label. At no point did your past band history ever come up. And so recently, the band Darsombra was touring Malaysia as part of their Southeast Asian tour, and they're telling me about a friend of theirs who had set up a cassette label in Indonesia, who had once been part of the band Meatjack, which was a band that I used to see in college all the time, and was one of my favorite bands, from that period of time, and is a band that I've carried the torch for ever since. And as they were telling me about this friend of theirs, I was thinking, wait a minute, I met a guy who has a cassette label in Indonesia, and I said, wait, did this guy set up a show or release something from the guy from Dalek? And Brian from Darsombra looks at me and goes, yeah. I was
I worked with Dalek for like 10 years, basically, or maybe longer, I guess, at this point, yeah.
And so, Meatjack was a band that I used to see all the time in college, and just because you guys toured all the time. And I used to go to shows at CB's all the time, and so if there was a good show, chances are Meatjack would be on the bill.
Yeah, we tried to do, we toured about 100 days a year at that point when I was in that band. So this is like 98 to 2002. I was with them for about 4 years. And that last year was was a bit on and off. We didn't have a full-time drummer. Will from Keel Hall and Crawl was drumming for us for a couple tours. So that we weren't hitting 100 shows a year at that point. But for the first at least 2 years I was there, we would always do about 100 shows each year, so about a third of the year. And Ralphie Boy, we would always end up on pretty good bills in New York. Like, we got lucky a couple times. We ended up on some festivals. There's this woman, Lori S., that used to do the Dosage Night, which was like kind of a big stoner. It was sort of a weird, interesting time, and there was a lot of different stoner stuff happening, and we sort of didn't really have a genre that we would really work with. So we would fit on a bill with like Disassociate and Candiria, But then we'd also play with Spirit Caravan all the time, like Wino's Band. So we were always playing with totally different kind of stuff, or then like, Unsane, like more kind of aggressive AMREP kind of stuff. So our bills were always really diverse, or Soylent Green, like relapse bands. So so it was interesting in that way that I got to see a lot of different stuff happening at the same time, sort of different scenes that all kind of overlapped a little bit. So yeah.
And I was a metalhead who had just moved to New York in college. And so when you say you were playing with Meatjack from 98 to 2002, that was almost exactly the period of time when I was going to shows, because I moved to New York in 97. From 98 to 2002, that's when I was at CB's almost every weekend.
Okay.
And we should talk about what you were actually doing in Meatjack at the time, because part of the reason why I wouldn't have recognized you is because you weren't on the stage, right?
I was a filmmaker for them. And when I say film, not video, like actual 16 millimeter films and slides. So I had 2 slide projectors and a unit, this kind of box that would sort of allow me to dissolve between slides, so I could sort of create kind of layers. And then I had 3 16 millimeter projectors, 2 that I would run reels on, and then 1 that I would could put a loop, so I'd have an image that sort of repeat itself. So basically, what I would do is I would cut together. I would either shoot films, either on 16 millimeter, and then I would shoot slides, 35 millimeter. This is all sort of the beginning of the digital era, but then I would also use found footage as well. So I would pull from films, pull from old newsreels, that kind of thing, and then also create my own stuff. So it was sort of a mix of found footage and footage that I was creating. And I would sort of set it up, like I would try to collage the images. I didn't want it to just sort of be like hit play, and then there's a thing. So as the band was sort of playing, I was sort of playing projectors, like switching between projectors, layering different images on top of each other, sort of trying to just sort of create a visual backdrop that would essentially sort of work with each song. So each what I was doing was tailored specifically for each song. It wasn't just like a very generic kind of background thing. So, and sometimes I would actually work with Brian about lyrical content. Like I wrote lyrics for I think 1 or 2 of the tracks on the EP, the Damn It Split EP, which is between the 2 albums. So sometimes I would actually work from his lyrics and try to create images. Other times it was just sort of like I would have an idea in my head, and maybe their lyrics were vague enough that I could just sort of throw some images in that would sort of make it work in a way. But yeah, it was fun. It was like I tried to, I used different techniques to try to just make it like visually interesting. And the thing that I always really loved is we would literally just alter a space. Like we would come in, literally we just hang in white sheets behind the band, but then we shut off all the lights in the room. The band had lights at their feet to light them. So literally from the band that played before us to us was like, it's like you're almost in a completely different space. So we're sort of setting up this sort of, not just it's a band with visuals, but it's sort of, we're trying to like change the space a little bit. So it was cool. I mean, we literally did it in massive rooms like First Avenue in Minneapolis, which is Prince's Club, which was like, can't believe I'm playing in Prince's Club, which was awesome. And then there's a place called Kirby's Beer Store in Wichita, which is like about the size of this porch that we're sitting on. And like I literally had the projections, and they were about the size of a TV, like behind the band. It was like so tiny, but it was fun. I mean, we like some of our best shows. We would literally play shows in basements, like house shows and stuff, and we'd just be like, "Can everyone sit on the floor so we can project over you?" And we do it, and it was kind of cool. We made it work in a lot of different settings and stuff, so it was fun. Yeah.
Did you want to be a filmmaker?
I had studied film, and I worked. In high school, I started making films with a buddy of mine, like Super 8 films. The 3 of us, 2 buddies. We were just sort of doing stuff, having fun. And I had a teacher who had kind of given us some old camera stuff, like from the 70s. And so it was just fun. And then I went to university for about 2 years and studied filmmaking. Eventually ended up working on a lot of documentaries. So either as a cinematographer or as an editor. So it's not, I'm not really a filmmaker per se, but I have enough of the skill set and then also enough of the interest in it. Meatjack for me was just sort of a fun thing, just to sort of, it was like, for me, it was a way to play around with images and play, like basically like how could I tell a story that doesn't go from A to B? Like it's just going to be multiple images and like on top of each other, or like, you're going to see like 6 different things, but they're not going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, so it's like basically just sort of putting images into people's head and letting them sort of make what they want out of them and figure out, how they work. So, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed filmmaking for a while, and I still I'd say in the past 10 years before I moved to Southeast Asia, friends would call me and I would work on different documentaries. Either like political stuff or art stuff, and I mean, for me, it's amazing. Like I've gotten to meet, a friend of mine did a documentary about Fred Lane. He's this outsider musician. I got to hang out with Fred Lane, which all my friends are like, "Oh my God, you met Fred Lane?" And me and the three, I'm like, he's a great guy. Got to Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn before he died. Got to some friends of mine did this documentary on the Catonsville Nine and the Catholic. Basically, what's called the Catholic left. They were basically nuns and priests that came out against the Vietnam War, and they would break into the draft boards and burn the draft cards so kids would go to war. And so he did this whole documentary about that. And so for 2 years, I just maybe once a month, he would call me, and I would just go meet these amazing people. Like I literally would just walk out, and I'm just running camera, he's interviewing these people, but I would just walk out of there just so filled with oh my God, how are these people 65, they've seen everything they've seen in the world. They're so positive. So yeah, so for me, it was always a really fun thing because I just got to meet amazing people and stuff. But yeah, I'm not a filmmaker per se.
touched on meeting in Kale, and we touched on you playing in Meatjack until 2002. 2002 is when I left New York and moved back to Malaysia. How did you end up moving to Bandung?
So after Meatjack, maybe a few years, right around the time I turned 30, which is 2004, I decided to start a record label. My grandmother had died. She left me a small amount of money, like as inheritance. And I was told by my father that the only money she ever got from a dead relative, she used to buy this record player. And it's like this, basically one of the big old, like kind of, it's literally still my dad's house. It's one of these, the big kind of deals where it's like a piece of furniture, and then the record player's inside with speakers. I don't know. It's like, I mean, I guess this is like 40s, like 1940s, 1930s or something. So I kind of thought, oh, okay. Like I've been touring, working with all these bands. I'd been working for 4 years around the same time with the Arts Journal. I was a managing editor for an Arts Journal. So I had like a knowledge of publishing. I had like a knowledge of all this music. I was like, why don't I just start a label, So I used that bit of money from her as sort of the funding for the first like release. So, and I sort of also thought it was kind of a nice tribute to her in terms of like what she did with her money, and then what I'm going to do with the money she left me. So that was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. That was their double CD. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like their first two albums. Then the first
Excavation? No.
Excavations, yeah, Excavations. Which
Dude, that was another band from the time where I was like I think back about this period of time where I don't know if we'll ever see bands like that again, where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had a trombone player.
Yeah,
they were like a doomcore band with a trombone player.
Yeah, I always refer to them as like an 8-piece, seven or 8-piece, depending on the year. 7 or 8-piece experimental hardcore band with a trombone player. Which, I mean, they weren't really that experimental, but they had like noisy bits.
Yeah,
Trad, who was there, they had like a keyboard guy, Derek, who ended up being the keyboard guy for Mastodon for like a couple albums worth of tours. And then Trad, who was kind of their noise guy, who would sort of do the interludes and the noise bits and stuff. And he had a solo project called Decimation Boulevard, which was amazing. And then he went on. Now he's playing with Nasty Band, which is like him and his brother David, and just a whole bunch of people. But so anyway, so that was the first release. But around that same time, I'd seen Dialect for the first time. So I literally went to see Keel Halls. It was the Oxes, Isis, Dialect, and Keel Hall. And Keel Hall, we met Keel. Our first day in Cleveland, we met Keel Hall. Aaron from Keel Hall came up to us, gave us some CDs. It was like, hey, we got this band, we want to do some shows with you. And like me, I'm like a huge Craw fan. Had no idea that Will, the drummer, was from Craw. Like, Chris is from Integrity. Dana was from La Gritona. Yeah. So it was like this, basically like I met the guy who I didn't know any of his past bands. Yeah. And then literally we sort of found out, oh my God, So we eventually played with him. It was a show's first anniversary of Nyabingi Dance Hall in Youngstown, Ohio. And it was Craw, Keel Hall, and Meatjack. And literally, it was this thing where literally the place was pretty much empty, but Keel Hall played, and the four of us were just standing right at the front of the stage, just mouths just on the floor. Like, we had never seen anything like that before. And it literally just changed. It's just like your whole just sense of music just shifts. You're like, oh man, everything's different now. Like, after 45 minutes of that, like, nothing is the same, man, about the way I think about music. And so so anyway, so I went to see Keel Hall, saw Dialect. In the process of seeing Dialect, DJ Still was with them at the time. They were 3-piece, and what he was doing with turntables to me was just really exciting. Sort of really very experimental approach, using pedals, putting his mouth on the stylus. Like he really had like a Jimi Hendrix of turntables kind of thing, and not to make it sound cheesy. So basically, I started talking with him about, hey, I want to do a 7. I'm starting this label. This is before Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I'm starting this label. I want to do a 7-inch with you. He's like, well, I just did a 7-inch. He's like, I'm trying to work on an album, blah, blah, blah. So eventually, I end up working with him. I put out his first, first and only solo album in like 2005, I guess, around 2005. So, and then fast forward to 2011, I was coming to Cambodia and Vietnam to meet a friend and just travel with her. And Chang, who was DJ Still, had begun a dialogue with Uchak from Homicide in Bandung. Homicide is sort of the I think, like, without Homicide there would be no hip hop in Indonesia. They were sort of very Very underground, very leftist, very Marxist, political, but just kind of this huge force in the underground there. So anyway, but Homicide had been very influenced by Dialect. So Uchok and Chang started talking about doing a collaboration, doing a 7-inch. The 7-inch eventually turns out to be an album that comes out a few years later. But I literally realized, hey, I'm going to be in Cambodia, Vietnam. Maybe I should just pop over to Indonesia. Like, I really knew very little. Right to Uchok, not knowing anything about him, and just saying, hey, you know, I'm coming. Can you tell me where to go to shows? Like, what record store should I hit? What show should I hit? He's like, just show up. And I was like, all right, okay, whatever, you know, like, and literally I just show up, and he's just like, yeah, this guy's a friend of mine. And so basically everyone's like, oh, you're a friend of Uchok? And I kind of came to realize he's this sort of major player in the Indonesian underground. And, but yeah, it was basically that was my first time there. I was only there for 5 days, but just met so many amazing musicians. Was living in this space called the Common Room, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but it was sort of a community space where artists, activists would kind of come together. They would have meetings there. There were rehearsals there. They had a hip-hop night when I was there. But I just met so many amazing people from that scene in that time period. They would just kind of all cycle through this place where I was staying. And I just was like, I need to come back here at some point, you know. So basically that trip was just Jakarta, Bandung, and Surabaya. And in Surabaya, I met up with Matthew from Aluk Todolo, the French black metal band. And he was making at the time, it's since finished, a documentary about black metal in East Java. So mostly in Surabaya and Sidoarjo. So he has a film called East of Hell, which I helped him shoot for like 3 or 4 days when I was there. It wasn't, you know, it was more just hanging out with Matt and getting to see. We basically went to 4 metal festivals in 3 days, and it was pretty awesome. But yeah, so that was like my first introduction. I basically was like, I need to come spend more time here. Went back to the States, started saving money, got involved in a relationship, which like I kind of really just kept me sort of living in the U.S. for a while, and then eventually, like at some point, I was just like, I'm just gonna move out of my house, put all my shit in storage. I've got money saved. I know I can travel for like 8 months, so I'm just gonna kind of go and see what happens. And so I went, basically came to Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and then eventually just sort of decided I wanted to live in Indonesia. Like the people there, the culture, the food. Everything's it's very welcoming, very like it felt very comfortable to me and very much like a place I wanted to be. So yeah, I guess I've been living there for about 2 years. I was back in New York for 5 months working just to get some money. But I've pretty much been there for about 2 years. Yeah. And love it. So yeah. So that's a really long story about how I got from age 28 until now.
In that period, you'd been running a couple labels, right?
Yeah, so I started, 2004, I started Public Guilt, which was my first label. First release was Cream Abdul Babar. It was all their unreleased stuff, or out of print stuff. Then Destructo Swarmbots, second album. It's a band called Treffen. It was sort of like kind of a math metal band. And the drummer went on to be in Upsilon A Crux and sort of a lot of those kind of bands. Yes, DJ Still, Psychic Paramount. Eventually worked with Dialect, Zoo, Decimation Boulevard, A La Muerte, Darsombra. There's 35 records altogether over, I guess, 7 or 8 years, 9 years, yeah. So that was basically my first label, and again, I was just sort of putting the mix of having publishing knowledge and bands that I thought were awesome, and just wanting to work with them. And it really ran the gamut from Cream Abdul Babar, who was kind of more, heavy hardcore, to stuff that was just full on more experimental. DJ Still turned me on to this guy named Strader Inst from Switzerland, who basically does this really intense, turntable experimentation, but it's beautiful. Some of what I was doing was more experimental, more drone, more noise. Some of it was more like Zoo was sort of like metalheads playing free jazz, and so it was pretty diverse. It was all sort of left field music, but it wasn't Discord. You couldn't pick up a CD and like, oh, I know what this is going to sound like. It's going to sound like the last band they put out. Like it's not that kind of label at all, which is for a business, it's a horrible business model, but like for me, I'm like, I don't listen to one genre of music, so I'm not going to release one genre.
takes on the tone of a label as a curator or as a tastemaker, because there are a couple labels I follow which, just because of the other things on the label. There's a label out of Portland that I really like called Fallen Empire, where you can sort of say everything has a kind of crusty black metal kind of take, but the bands are so different from each other but every time I hear one of the bands that Fallen Empire puts out, this is something new. This is something that I didn't hear before. Sight unseen, I'll get something when it comes out on Fallen Empire, just because I know, like, even if I don't get it now, in 6 months I'll be listening to it and be like, oh, this is genius.
I mean, pre-internet, like, I bought things based on the label that put it out or the cover art. Like, or if somebody told me you should check this out. Like, there was no, like, let me see if they got a clip on YouTube. And no, like, let me listen to this for 5 minutes before I buy it. And even now, sometimes I'll still go to record stores and I want that feeling. So I'll literally just be like, I'm just going to get this. I don't know what it is. I'm just going to get it. And I used to, when I would go to New York, like back years ago, I'd literally just go to Chinatown and just buy, like, I would just give myself a budget. Like, okay, you can spend $30 on CDs that you have no idea what they are because it's all in Chinese. And like, I really enjoy doing that. I mean, most of the time it's just like crap pop stuff, but every now and again there's something you're like, oh, that's an interesting song, or just like, even just like sometimes I just listen to the texture or tone of music, I'm like, oh, this is like an interest, like the feel that this is. So yeah, I kind of love, like, some of my favorite records I bought based on cover art, and then they just open up this whole like world. Like, I think I'd mentioned, we were talking before, there's an Archie Shepp record called The Magic of Juju, and the cover is a skull that has like these flowers painted on it. So it's very much like, and I'm just sort of like, this is kind of cool looking. And so I bought it, and it's like one of the most amazing free jazz records ever, like mixing like kind of Creole instruments and sounds and stuff. But for me, that opened up just like this whole world of like, getting into, like, I was already into jazz, but it just opened up this whole side that I didn't know as much, So yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I always just put out stuff that I felt like should be out, and I still do. And there was even, I gotta be honest, like, even the first Aluktonola record I did was their debut, which was their 7-inch, and they sent me this CD, and I was like, this is amazing, this is just phenomenal. And I wrote to them, I was like, these are amazing demos, and they're like, no, we want to release this. And I'm like, well, the songs are too long for a 7-inch, so we did edits to get it down to 7-inch length. But then, and I basically just, without even hearing it, and I would frequently do that, I would just work with a band, and I would just be like, I just want to put out your next thing, and I just sort of trust that they're going to do something amazing. And I did that with a lot of people. But so they send me Dissension. This is, and I remember I actually had, I don't have a car. My mom was away, and so I was driving her car while I had to pick her up at the airport or something. And I'm listening to that CD in her car, and it's not an album it's not like a, it's not like a Led Zeppelin record where you could drive down the street and listen to it. It's like a really something you have to sort of sit with. And I literally remember sitting there and just I felt like my body chemistry changing as I was listening to this record, and I was like, this is not good. I'm driving, like, it's almost like I'm on drugs, like I'm totally sober. And I was like, and so I listened to like about 2 or 3 times, and I was like, I don't know that I really like this. Like, I wasn't even sure if I liked it. I mean, I love it now. Like, it was one of those things, like, I was like, I don't know if I like this, but I was like, I know that there's no music in the world that's like this, so this has to be released. Yeah. Like, even if I don't like it, this has to come out. And I eventually ended up just completely loving the album. But I also put it out thinking, this is good. This is literally going to be something I put out. It's going to sell 20 copies, and I'm going to be sitting on like 1,000 CDs. It literally is the best-selling record on that label, like, just out of nowhere. And I think it was sort of that time, like blogs, like Blogspot was a big thing. And so literally it got leaked onto a couple like really influential sort of metal blogs. And I think because of that, like, it sold. And I sort of tried to play that game where it's like, 10 people are going to download it for free, but 1 or 2 of those 10 are going to buy the CD. So you sort of have to adapt and work. You can't just go, there's 8 people downloading my album for free. You just go, no, there's 2 people buying it. So you use it as a way of, like, I think that ended up becoming a thing where it was like, there's better advertising than the reviews and stuff at that point. Like, you had these sort of tastemaker blogs, kind of,
I mean, you started a label at that very strange period of time when, physical media started becoming obsolete, and it wasn't clear how quickly that would happen or what form digital distribution would take. But so if you're saying 2004 you started your label?
Yeah.
So that iTunes came out 2004, right?
I don't know. I didn't actually get into. I mean, that whole catalog, the whole Public Guild catalog, is on iTunes and digital stuff. But that kind of came later. I feel like actually not Drag City, Thrill Jockey approached me about putting my catalog digital through. They had like a digital kind of boutique store at some point. And then after that, I was like, oh, maybe this is a thing I should do. And so then I went to like, I guess it was IOTA at the time. But everything got bought out by the Orchard. So yeah, I went to a digital distributor at that time. And I still get like these $20 a month or something. And then I have to at the end of every year I have to sit and figure out, it's 35 releases, and then half the money's mine, half the money's, so it's literally, it's more of a pain in the ass than it's really worth for the amount of money that comes in. But I like the fact that it's out there.
Yeah.
And then also the one thing I always loved about digital was that if the record goes out of print, it's never out of print. Like digital's never out of print. And so what I would try to do, also at that time period, realizing that like digital was such a thing, Napster, I guess Napster was still around, I don't remember. But either whatever it was, people could get free music, and I did too. Like I wasn't like if there was something amazing somebody told me you got to check out, I would check it out. I didn't shame people for doing it. I didn't have like any sort of ethical But I also was like, yeah, if the band's gonna come through, I'm gonna go buy a shirt and I'm gonna buy the album. Like if I like something, I'm gonna buy it. But I tried to make packaging like really unique because I sort of was like, okay, like what. If an album is not music anymore because music's online, so an album has to be like packaging. It has to be like you have to have it's an object, which sort of goes back to LPs and stuff. And so you're talking about that Jethro Tull album that stands out, like this interesting packaging. Something opens up and this happens, or just really. So I really focused a lot on design and artwork with the records, but I also made a very conscious effort to. I didn't want to label like there's some labels that have a consistent aesthetic. Like where the Young God, like where they all have this sort of stripe, and I literally wanted the label to just disappear. Like it was sort of, I aesthetically wanted the label to disappear from the release. So the name was always really small. The stuff was always really small. So I tried to make every record look completely different. I tried to have like 35 releases, and none of them looked alike. Like I sort of wanted it to sort of just be like these are the individual statements of the artists, as opposed to this collective record label kind of aesthetic, But having said that, like I love labels like that. I totally realize there's some labels that they put stuff out, and I'm like, I love that I can have 10 records that all kind of look the same, sitting next to each other. But I just at that point I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to each record just sort of speak to what the artist wanted. And for me, it was also really fun as a publisher. I got to work with all these like specialty printers. You end up paying a little bit more for different inks and papers and stuff. But for me, it was way more fun than like just having a bunch of CDs and jewel cases or whatever. And that was the thing. At the end of the day, I wanted to have fun. Like I wanted to be enjoying myself. It wasn't a business in the sense of like I'm gonna find these bands and they'll get big and we'll make lots of money. It was just sort of like I believe in what these people are doing. They put money into their projects. I'll put some money into into releasing an album. Hopefully, at the end of the day, nobody's broke. Yeah. We all had a good time, and there's a bunch of people with a cool CD or a cool LP in their collection now. It was that was sort of what it was. It was just sort of, it was never like I'm gonna make money doing this. Some records did make money. Some records lost money. Some broke even. The whole thing is total probably broke even. But yeah, it wasn't about that.
label is catered to one of a kind sort of things that, at best it's going to be a niche audience. Even something like Alak Tadolo, like I remember just checking it out based on the same kind of people who would recommend other like weird black metal bands. It's like, so if they were right about Decibel Omega, maybe they were right about Alak Tadolo. And I remember listening to it and being like, how is this black metal? You know what I mean? It's like there's always like that kind of like, what is this?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, they basically, honestly, when I first heard their first 7-inch, what became their first 7-inch, the demos, like to me, I was like, they reminded me of the band Circle. Circle from Finland. To me, I was like, oh, this is Circle, but it's like evil. Like it's more like it's like dark. It's like Circle mixed with like Noibot. Like that. That's what I heard. And they were like, and literally, I talked to those guys, and they're like, no, we're just basically, it's like we're black metal guys playing krautrock. And literally they told me that the first time they played together as a 3-piece, they wanted to do a band which was a tribute to Tony Conrad and Faust, which is that like kind of seminal album. And they were like, yeah, we just wanted to play that live once, and then we became Alak Tadolo. So like you can literally just sort of see the roots of what they became. But yeah, fucking amazing band, dude. Like I was really honored to get to work with them. Period, and then I got to see them a couple times in the U.S. and then sort of right at the end of Public Guilt, they did a big tour in Europe with Menace Room around the Roadburn Festival, and I basically just wrote them and I was like, do you guys want a driver, merch guy? I was like, I want to see you guys play every night. It's just great. Like I'd never been to Europe, I'd never been anywhere, and I was 37, so I just like hopped on a plane and spent 2.5 weeks cruising around Northern Europe with 2 French bands, one from Montreal and one from Paris. It was fucking amazing. It was like eye-opening because I'd never really left the country, and then also just talk about like 5 amazing people and 2 amazing bands, and I got to see everything. So yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah. And then Roadburn, got to go to Roadburn, which was cool. And the cool thing about Roadburn is they actually have someone sell the merch. You can pay a percentage and they'll sell the merch for you. And basically the band was like, look, you guys, you're not making any money being here, so we're just gonna have them sell the merch. You just like get stoned and watch bands all day. Cool. So I got to see Circle, I got to see Scorn, I got to see Casper Broadsword Massacre. I didn't get to see Voivod. That was the one band I still have never to this day seen. It was very influential. Keel Hall came through 2001, because I remember it was after 9/11. Keel Hall came through Baltimore, and they were just doing a bunch of shows, and I had a couple days off, and so I literally hopped in the van with them and did merch for them. And we went up to New York, played CB's with Players Club. It was, I don't know, JJ Paradise Players Club. It was like Dave from Unsane, Cooper from Kill Van Call, Jim from
They opened for Zenny Gable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those guys, like Meatjack did a bunch of shows with those guys, so we kind of knew them. And so I was like, oh yeah, I want to go hang out with Players Club. So I went up there, and so we come back and they're playing Keel Hall's playing in Philly with one of Dave Whitty's bands. I can't remember which band. Maybe it was Burnt by the Sun. But anyway, like I'm literally standing at the merch table, and like Keel Hall's playing, and Chris just breaks into this riff. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, Voivod, this whole band is just Voivod. And like I said something to Chris, I was like, dude, that riff, it's just Voivod. He's like, yeah. He's like, I always said it will. He's like, without Voivod and weed, there would be no Keel Hall. But it was like this thing where literally I was infatuated with this band for like 3 years and never made that connection until like I'm standing, like doing merch for them in this little shit club in Philly. And I was just like, they're like a Voivod band. No wonder I love them so much. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
You were the one, or maybe you told me the story about how Brian explained to you that all Meatjack was King Crimson plus Melvins.
Yeah, it basically was sort of like King Crimson's Red, which is sort of their dark, like they kind of, like 73, 74, sort of their darkest album, like very angular kind of stuff. And then the Melvins underneath, just the kind of slow, bassy. Yeah, that's all it was. Like the drumming, the drummer at the time, Eric, was so they had three different drummers. One that I wasn't around, this guy Charlie, but Mike Hill was the first drummer, who was amazing, and he literally was just this. I think he was kind of obsessed with Bill Bruford and stuff, but he was like this black guy from Baltimore who like had this amazing knowledge of funk and everything. I mean, he's just one of those guys you just put behind a kit, and he's just phenomenal. But he would do these weird time signature things that were very King Crimson, very Bill Bruford, and actually, like, I actually prefer some of those songs. Were recorded on like a demo and then got re-recorded for Trust with the different drummer, and I actually like the original versions because the drum beats are a little bit different, you know. But yeah, and then the second drummer, Eric, he was just a huge Melvins fan, like super Del Crover. So like you just I mean, it's sort of, you just pull back and listen to it and you're like, oh yeah, it's just King Crimson.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously more going on than that, but just to break it down to its essence.
So let's talk about the label you have now, based out of Bandung.
Yeah, so I have a label now called 100,000, or Seratus Ribu, which is Indonesian for 100,000. It's actually, unfortunately, a bit confusing because people think that's how much the cassette costs, when actually the cassette costs like 40,000 or 50,000 usually. So, but whatever. It's based on there's a J. Paul song called 100,000, which I really love, and I had been kind of obsessed with that. Been obsessed with J. Paul, but then obsessed with that song, and so I just was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna name the label after that." And then later I was like, "Oh, it's whatever." But I frequently make bad business mistakes, and I don't really care. So yeah, that started, I guess, about almost 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, I started getting things together. What was it? 2 years ago, 3 years? 2 years ago, yeah. So the first thing I put out was actually a box set of A Luke Todolo. So A Luke Todolo's first 4 records, Finsterness, Dissension, Voix, and Cult Rock. Some of them had been on cassette but were out of print. Others had never been on cassette, but Voix had never been on cassette. So I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. Voix. So basically I just talked to them. I was like, hey, let's, I want to do cassettes of all these. And then we eventually decided to do a box set. So we did, basically there's 100 box sets, and then there's another 100 of each cassette solo. So in 50 were in Europe with the band. So the band has 50 box sets and then 50 cassettes of each of those 4 albums individually, and then I had the same here. So for distribution in Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. So that was the first thing, and it was sort of, the hope was, and hopefully still is, that they'll come over to Indonesia and tour with S.E.A. They're really good friends with S.E.A. So the idea at the time was, I'm going to put this out sort of in hopes that people that don't know about them, because I think they're kind of unknown in this region, people that don't know about them will at least hear about them, and maybe there'll be a little bit of buzz, and then when they come, there'll be more interest for people to see them. So yeah, I did that, and then it just sort of, I would just see, musicians I really liked. Coffee Faith is a guy named Rio from Jogja, and he's part of the Jogja Noise Bombing crew, and that crew is anywhere from 5 to 15 people. I think it kind of just sort of revolves, people revolving. And they did this show where it was literally they all set up in different spaces in a room, and they each played 5-minute sets. So literally some was just harsh noise, some was just more, different kind of things. And Rio, who's the youngest at the time, he was maybe 18 or 19, he comes out and he just plays this 5 minutes and it was just compositionally so beautiful and so like amazing, but like, at the same time still very much, noise. And I was like, wow, I want to do something with him, and so that's when I kind of came up with the idea to do splits between artists in Southeast Asia and America or Europe. So I immediately thought of A La Muerte, who's my friend Bianca. I'd done 2 releases with her on Public Guilt, and I sort of felt like they had a really similar vibe, but different sonics, like sonically very different, but at the same time, like what they were doing there was a common feeling to it. So, and that's what I try to, like if I do splits or something, I like the idea of matching a feeling, but not a sound. I don't want to have 2 bands. Like, I hate going to a show and there's like 5 bands and they all sound the same, because to me that's the worst. Like, but I love the idea of like, oh, there's like an arc here. Like, yeah, there's 4 bands, they all sound a little bit different, but there's a common thread. But it's not just like you're watching the same band for, So yeah, so I've just over the time just sort of seen artists that I really like and work with. I mean, that's sort of what it's always been. It's just sort of like, wow, this person's doing something cool. I don't think anyone's releasing their stuff. Let's see if they want to do something. Like, and just sort of feeling like, I like this, I want to help this get further into the world,
And right now your label is cassettes only, right?
At the moment it's cassettes only, and that's really sort of based on the underground in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. In terms of, I think the maximum for doing CDs, or the minimum for doing CDs, is like 200 or 300. And I'm doing runs of either 100 for things that I think are a little bigger, and like runs of 50 for small, like the noise cassettes are like 50. Just because I know there's a limited audience for that, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't come out. You know? So it allows me to sort of work in smaller runs. It's also, I feel like, certain genres. So in America, like the cassettes were kind of never went away in the noise scene and the black metal scene, but they sort of went away with everything else. What I've learned about Indonesia is cassettes just never went away, period. Like they changed a little bit, but like literally there were like bands like, you know, Megadeth would play, and then they would literally go to the store and buy their album here, because it was like Indonesia was the only place in the world where their album was ever pressed on cassette. So like they couldn't actually get the cassettes anywhere else. So they were just like, oh, I want to see my album on cassette, you know, like it's kind of a natural thing, a throwback thing, I guess. But yeah, I feel like the scene in Indonesia is sort of really sort of centered around cassette. So sometimes I'll do like be the only person that releases it. Other times, like Potro Joyo, which is a project from Mukir from Senyawa. Like I basically met him and we were hanging out, and he just starts playing me this music. He's like, this is my new project. And I was like, this is amazing. He played me like 3 songs. He's like, you want to put it out? And so I did the cassette version. Morphine Records in Germany did the CD. Maybe I don't know if they ever did an LP. But so sometimes it's that. It's like it's just sort of like just doing a smaller thing. Other times it's the only release thing that comes out. So.
Is it mail order through the website? Do you, because downstairs we were talking to the Tandang store guys, and you brought some cassettes with you.
Yeah, it's totally DIY. There's no distribution. So my other labels, I've worked with distributors, and that's always a double-edged sword. I can basically count on 2 fingers the distributors that I trust in this world, and I've probably worked with about 10. And I mean, there's so many distributors that go out of business, and then you just never get paid. Like, you've shipped them hundreds of records, and then you just never see any money for those. So it's sort of or then other distributors stay in business, but they just are really shitty about paying people. So as much as a pain in the ass it is to deal direct with stores, that's sort of the only option in Indonesia. There really are distributors. So basically, I have stores in Sumatra, in Sulawesi and Java that I work with, and then shops in Singapore and Malaysia also. I try with the out-of-country stuff, I try to sell it, sell it or trade it, just so I don't have to track down my consignments in other countries. But in Indonesia, it's basically you ship them 10 cassettes and then check, they'll, some stores are really good, they'll send you a report every month on what's sold. Other stores will just, you have to bug them, and it's some it's like DIY punk spots, as it's sort of more like official, like Tandang kind of stores, that have like somebody that works there every day. Others, it's like DIY spaces, and they just, whenever there's a show, the shop's open kind of thing, So, and that's just sort of the nature of the Indonesian music scene. I mean, it's sort of, it's small, and but it's amazing. So, So unfortunately, it's a lot of DIY. But at the same time, it's cool because I get to sort of meet and talk with other people, and sort of at the end of the day, like, as much as I love putting out records, it's also about just learning about other music that I'm eventually gonna like. So, like, the more I'm talking to people directly, the more I'm dealing with them, whether it's business or whatever, the more I'm learning, you like this kind of stuff, you heard this band, you like this kind of stuff, you gotta check out this DJ, he's amazing, this other guy. So at the end of the day, it's just sort of it's a big conversation. It's like putting out music, buying music. It's all just part of this bigger thing. That's not, it's just about loving music, loving art and culture. So, yeah.
And if people want to find the stuff that you put out, how can they find you?
So I have an Instagram, Seratus, SERATUS _Ribu. RIBU, that's Instagram, and then there's seratusribu.net, all one word. Seratusribu.net actually has like sound samples and everything. Also, I've started doing a mix series, so basically where I'm having friends, other artists, activists, poets, curators, people that are like in the art scene in Indonesia and Southeast Asia that I know, starting to do, like, basically put together 1 hour to 2 hours of a mix. Like, it can be like a DJ mix where they're actually putting stuff together. It can just be like, hey, here's 20 songs that I really love. But sort of usually they pick a theme to base it around. So that's something I just started. I did the first 4 came out, I guess about a month or 2 ago. It was Meatjack from Homicide, Mad Rodder, who's this Dutch national who's been living in Indonesia for about 26 years, I think. But he's been studying Jaipong, which is sort of a neo-traditional West Javanese, Sundanese form of music, and he had actually gone to Rotterdam to DJ Jaipong for a Kerinding attack at like a show. And I just said, I'm like, dude, you've been studying, if anyone knows like the best Jaipong tracks, it's you. Like, other than the musicians and the people who are part of that, in terms of like a historian, archivist, I was like, so you want to put together a mix? So he literally just went through and put together 90 minutes of like, stuff that's on like out of print cassettes. Like, so it's basically, so it's a mix of like, that's traditional stuff. Meatjack from Homicide did all of his favorite 70s and 80s stuff. So it's everything from, like James Chance and the Contortions and Teenage Jerks, and, Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, and like Dutch punk bands and stuff. But then it gets into like Schoolie D and Ghetto Boys, and so but the idea is just basically, again, it's sort of like I always get turned on to music by mixes by other people, like Fact Magazine, Dummy. They would always do these, like, I would listen to the mixes by bands that I liked, like what the bands that I like, and so it's kind of the same idea. But I just wanted to focus on people that are from the underground scenes in Southeast Asia, to just sort of be like, hopefully that expands the listening of people, So, and for me, it's just, I literally like the other two, so it's Uchok, Mad Rider, Zinlai, who's my friend Odie, and then Hax and I, so who's this woman Karina. Literally, like both Odie and Karina, like sent me their mixes, and I was like, what is half of this shit? This is amazing. Like I wrote to Karina like not too long ago. I was like, yeah, I was jogging one day, and I usually jog to like club and stuff, and it just like literally just slipped into her mix, and I was like, I'll just keep this on. And I kept jogging to like this mix, which is all like kind of industrial, like German industrial kind of techno-y sort of stuff. And I wrote to her, and I was like, man, like, you know, I've been enjoying your mix in certain ways, but yeah, for me, it's just exciting to just be like, what are these people listening to? And I'm 44, so I'm like, I want to know. She's like 21. I'm like, what is a 21-year-old listening to? Odie's like 22 or 23, and part of the punk scene and part of the techno scene. And I'm like, what do these people know that I don't know?
Yeah.
Like, because that's the thing. Like, I always want to learn. I always want to find something new that I haven't heard before. I always want to hear something that's not going to come to me. Like, I'm not going to naturally find that.
Yeah. But
a 21-year-old is, because of the scene they're in, or the whatever, just where they are in their life and where they are in art school or college or whatever. Like they're locked into something that I'm not as a 44-year-old. But I'm still going to listen to that music. Yeah, I'm not 21. I'm not in art school. But I'm still going to listen to the same music if it's amazing music. So for me, like doing the series, doing the label, it's all about learning about new stuff and trying to put cool stuff into the world. You know, I hope that people dig it, and if they don't, then that's the thing right now. There's so much stuff in the world that there's really not like I like this, I don't like this. It's just sort of more like I don't like this, I want to listen to something else. It's not like you know, 25 years ago there were 4 TV channels, and if you didn't like something, you were kind of screwed. And now it's like, hey, you don't like this album, put on another album, or, put on another YouTube video. There's no it's just wide open. So yeah, if you don't like what I'm doing, who cares? You know, I don't care.
It's as good a place as any to leave off.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like, was that a bad? Maybe that was a bad way to end. Yeah, if you
No.
don't like what I'm doing, I don't give a shit. That's fine. I'll see you later.
what's the small sound